What is going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Louisiana Outdoorsman. As you can tell, we are not on the water today. We are not in a boat. We are not in a truck. We are not in my shed, but we are in the kitchen. I haven't done a cooking video in a while. I'm sure what you guys are asking, well, he done fried fish, he done made fish tacos, he done baked fish. What else can he make? Well, today I'm going to change it up and I'm going to do something a little, call it home style here in Louisiana. I'm going to make a traditional rice and gravy the Cajun way. And we're going to do basically smothered pork chops. So I got some pork chops right here. I'm about to season them up. I'm going to show you how, step for step, I do this process. Season the pork chops, how I prepare the pot, how I do everything. You guys are going to be along for the ride for the whole process. So I'll strap this onto my chest and then we are going to begin the process of seasoning the meat and cooking the pork chops and smothering them and making the rice and gravy and everything. So stay tuned. Alright, so what we do first, like I said, I got all my seasonings right here, got my pork chops. So what I'm going to first do is take some olive oil here and I'm going to put it at the bottom of the pot that we're going to be using, just to where whenever we brown our meat that it won't completely stick to the pot whenever because this is going to be extremely hot when I put this meat in there to brown it real suddenly, and then we're going to take it off. But like I said, first of all, we're going to season the pork chops. What I got here, some Tony Sashers, just some seasonal. It's got a bunch of spices, salt, all that good stuff. So what you want to do when you're cooking the rice and gravy is you want to season your meat generously, because whenever you brown your meat, some of that seasoning is going to come off on the pan itself, on the pot itself, and then also you might lose a little bit once it's actually cooking down in the gravy. So don't be afraid to over season it. Then we got some cayenne pepper here. Gonna put a little bit of that. Don't want it too spicy to burn your mouth, so I'm gonna just put a little bit of that in there. Then we got some garlic powder. I normally use garlic powder on chicken and pork chops. I don't use it too much on beef, but just those three. Then we're gonna kind of mix it up. Oh, the spices got to me. And as you can tell, I'm using bone-in pork chop. I find the bone does add a little bit of extra flavor when you're actually cooking the gravy, so I'd almost always use bone-in pork chop. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more seasoning. Like I said, you never should be afraid to over season when you're doing rice and gravy. And just a little bit, I'm not gonna put too much more cayenne because, like I said, it's got some heat to it. That should be enough seasoning once I finish mixing it all up. Alright, now that we got all of our pork chops seasoned pretty good, as you see, you got a nice little coating on them. The pot that we're going to use is pretty hot right now. I'm going to actually move around some of that oil. As you can tell, it's really really hot. So when I put them pork chops in there, it's going to brown them pretty quickly, which is what you want when you're doing rice and gravy, because you want this seasoning to stick to the bottom of the pot. I'm going to show you guys in a little bit why. These are some pretty big pork chops, so it's probably going to take a few rounds of browning to finish all of them. So we're going to leave these in a bowl. We're going to let these sit for probably about maybe 2 minutes per side to where it browns it real good. And I'll show you guys what it looks like when I flip it over. Alright guys, as you can tell, come a little bit closer. Whenever I'm going to flip these pork chops over, they're going to have a nice brown outside, and you're also going to see some of that seasoning, like I was talking about, sticking to the pot itself. So there's a nice little crust on the outside. I'm just going to flip it over to the other side. And that seasoning that's stuck to the pot is going to be key to what's going to make the flavor of your rice and gravy come here later on once I brown all of these pork chops. Alright, now that both sides of these pork chops are nice and seared or browned, as I would say, I got an extra plate here. What I'm going to do is take these 4 out. I'm going to put the ones that haven't been seared back in the pot and sear those as well, because just I didn't have enough room. So like I said, you can see that crust on both sides of the pork chop. Well, that one doesn't have too much of a crust on it, but as you can see, that one. And as you can see, the bottom of the pot is starting to have that nice brown, what we call in Cajun country, that's some grenise on the bottom of the pot that we're going to use later to put some seasoning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the brown pork chops in the oven. I'm going to go ahead and put these raw pork chops to brown in the same pot, just adding on to the flavor that we're going to have at the bottom of this pot once everything is nice and brown. So I'll get back with you guys once I brown both of these sides and start the next process of this smothered pork chop meal. Alright guys, this second batch of pork chop is just wrapping up. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and take them out. They're nice and brown. Just trying to fit them all in this plate. Play Tetris with some pork chops real quick. And hopefully, let's put that right on top and hopefully it stays. Gonna put all of these now back in the oven, the oven is not on, by the way, just to let y'all know. I'm just using it as a place to put them in the meantime. But as you can see on the bottom of this pot, it is nice and brown. It's all seasoning right here. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cook down these onions. Actually what it is, it's a local business here down in Orneville, Louisiana, that actually cuts up these vegetables. It is yellow onions, bell peppers, celery, green onions, parsley, and garlic. It would take a lot of time if you were to do this and cut all of this on your own, so it's so convenient to buy this in store, already cut up. It's fresh, so it's always going to be ready to go whenever you cook a rice and gravy. So what you're going to do, I'm going to put this whole thing in. Now this pot is still just as hot. I never lowered the temperature. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that cook down, and once that water starts coming out of the onions and bell peppers, it's going to kind of dissolve that seasoning on the bottom, and I'll be able to scrape all that off. That way it'll come and emerge into my gravy when it's cooking. Also, if you live in Louisiana, you're going to know why you need this type of spoon. I don't know what they're called, but I just call it my scraping spoon. And as you can tell, what you're going to see here is once these onions and stuff start to kind of cook down, you can see the juice and the liquid that's coming out of it, which is all the water that was in the vegetable itself. And as I take this spoon and scrape it across, you can see that seasoning just coming right off of the pot. Now some of them may take a little bit extra, and that's what this spoon is for. You kind of just want to scrape all that off, and as you can see, the seasoning is just coming right off, and it's gonna blend in with all these onions and cook down with it, which makes the flavor extremely intense. And as you can see, it's basically all scraped off already. I didn't really have to do much work with my spoon. So what I'm gonna do, or what you want to do if you're cooking this, is you want to make sure that these onions are cooked down probably maybe 10 to 15 minutes on the same temperature that you browned your pork chops on. And I just stir it every once in a while, make sure it's not sticking or anything like that. And then once this 10 minutes elapses, I'll get back to you guys and show you what the next step is. Alright guys, as you can tell, these onions and bell peppers and stuff are nice and cooked down. They're real soft. So what I'm going to do now, before they start burning, I'm going to reinsert these pork chops back into the pot. And I'll put them in one by one because I want to show you guys something. Instead of just dumping them in like I normally do, I want to kind of give you guys a little heads up of what you want to make sure you do whenever you're cooking this. Which is, once all the pork chops are in, you can see as they were sitting in that oven, they were sweating out all of that flavor that they got. And you can see that's all the the pork juice and everything like that, that's still good. That you want to make sure this goes back in the pot. You do not want to dump that. So you're just gonna put that back in the pot just to add a little bit of extra flavor. Now that all the pork chops are in there, a lot of people like to add water and stuff like that when making a gravy. But to add more flavor to it, instead of adding just water, what I like to add is this chicken stock or chicken broth. It just gives it, normally when I cook smothered chicken and smothered pork chops, I'm always going to use chicken broth. Or if I'm doing some type of beef, whatever, and gravy, I'm going to use beef broth. But like I said, pork and chicken, always going to use chicken broth. And I'm actually going to put in 3 of these, 1 big one and 2 small ones, because I like to use majority chicken broth and maybe a tiny little bit of water to fill it up. So I'm just going to pour this in there. There's no specific order or way you got to pour this in there. Just make sure you get all of it. Try not to pour it right on top of the pork chops, because you don't want to take some of the loose seasoning that's already off of it. Learned that the hard way one time. So I said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pour all 3 of these, and then I'll get back with you guys once everything is poured and ready to go. Alright, now that I got all of the chicken broth in here, you can see some of the pork chops are still kind of barely sticking out the surface. I want to actually cover all of that, because this is going to cook. It's only about 3:30 right now, and this is probably going to cook down to about 5:30, 6 o'clock tonight. This isn't a quick meal by any means. So what I'm going to do, like I said, I do add a little bit of water. So what I normally do is just fill up this Gidrich container that my vegetables came in. Also going to get a little bit of the extra vegetables that was trapped in there. I'm just going to finish pouring that as well in there. You can tell that everything is actually covered now. I know it looks light right now, but once it starts to cook down and everything like that, it's going to get darker, it's going to get thicker. And we're going to let this sit for probably about another hour and a half before I even touch it to add more seasoning and anything like that. So I'm going to put the camera down and watch some TV or something, and let this cook down for a little bit, and I'll get back with you guys whenever it's ready to add more seasoning and everything else. Alright guys, it's been about an hour and a half. Let's open up this lid and see what we got going on here. Looking pretty good, if I must say myself. As you can tell, it did get a little bit darker than what it was in the beginning. I said it's from all the browning of the meat on the bottom. Now what I do add just a tiny bit, just to get it a little bit dark, because I do like a darker gravy, is you can get some of this kitchen bouquet here. It's just basically literally just for browning your gravy more than if you would like it darker, which I do like a darker gravy. But this is what I use whenever but like I said, it's not much. It's maybe a couple little dashes of mess. You don't want to dump like a quarter of the bottle, half the bottle, nothing like that, because you're going to basically have a black gravy and you don't want that. But as you can tell, it's still cooking down. The pork chop's starting to get really tender, as you can tell. So I don't want to stir this too hard, but it needs to get thicker than what it is. But that's going to come with cooking down. Still will cook down for another 30 minutes to an hour before I take this out. So the fat of the pork chop should start to thicken this up as it gets lower and lower in the pot and starts to cook down more and more. But I just did a little taste test myself. It does need a little bit more seasoning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a tad bit more of Tony's to the, and I don't do any measurements, and anybody from Louisiana that cooks can tell you, you don't do no measurements. And I'm going to do a tad bit of Tony's Astray, and then I'm going to add a tad bit of just regular old-fashioned Morton table salt. I'm going to stir that together. And what you want to do when you're stirring this, once the pork chops get real tender, you kind of just want to slide that spoon back and forth, or else if you start flipping the pork chops all over the place, they're gonna fall apart, and then you got pork chops really everywhere in your gravy. So you just kind of want to just slosh the gravy around to where the seasoning gets in there. And we're gonna give it another test without burning yourself, because it's super hot. I'm gonna actually add a tiny bit more salt to that. And by tiny, I mean a helping portion. But I'm gonna stir this together. And like I said, I'm gonna let this cook down for about another 30 minutes. I'm actually cooking some corn and green bean, sweet peas with this. So I'm gonna actually start those and I'm also get back with you guys once I think this is cooked down enough to the finished product, so you guys stay tuned. Alright, so here we got the finished product. As you can tell from the last time I checked in, the gravy has gotten quite a bit thicker, and it's cooked down way, because you can tell right here, this line right here is where it used to be, where it started out, and now it's real thick. Pork chops are falling apart if I was to pick them up. Got the corn, sweet peas, everything is cooked. Rice is cooked. Everything is done. I am gonna sit down and enjoy this meal now. I hope you guys did enjoy. It's a little bit change up of what I used to been doing. So, but I think we got a little redfish trip planned on for next weekend, assuming that the weather's gonna hold up. But as always, I hope you guys enjoy and stay tuned for another episode of Louisiana Outdoorsman.